Oh,
Indeed,
good.
indeed.
Beer. Beer is a necessity. Necessity. I'm an educated man.
I had a very, very delightful. Let me adjust this. I had a very, very delightful blueberry whiskey smash today because my wife.
I just live in a cave, and that's just where I live. All right.
Yeah, my wife.
Turned on a bunch of fucking lights, and it still looks like this in the camera.
No, it's fine. Like, we can see your face now, Mike. That's all that matters.
Because my wife, we went to Ellicott City to meet up with Mike and his wife today, and we ended up going to Ellicott Distilleries, and I had a delightful blueberry whiskey smash, which was strong as fuck, man. Good God,
I believe you.
That thing was like, I had to sip it. I'm like, ooh, this is.
I've had a blueberry whiskey smash somewhere, but I don't remember where I have it. It wasn't in Ellicott City, because I don't remember the last time I've been to Ellicott City. I suppose I could swim there.
Some days.
Hi, Tessa.
Hey, stranger, long time no see.
Can't hear you because I got the headphones in.
Yeah. You have, but no, very delightful, very good afternoon. Came back here, started watching, got in an episode of What We Do in the Shadows, and then we started watching Wellington Paranormal, which is the sister show to that's in New Zealand. That's about the cops from What We Do in the Shadows, the movie, and they're encountering the paranormal, and like they never believe when they're encountering the paranormal, even when faced with very obvious shit. It's hilarious.
I'll have to check that out. Is it on Hulu too?
It is on HBO Max, actually.
Oh, all right. It'll probably end up on something at some point.
I only have access to it because Xander got one of her friends gave us their account information for that and Disney Plus. So now I have not all the streaming services, but enough of them.
Yeah. I have. I don't have HBO Max, but I've got access to most of them. I think I even pay for a couple of them.
I pay for two, like Amazon Prime and
Amazon Prime is more than just a streaming service. It's also the instant free shipping button.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, run by a horrible corporation that does evil, vile things, but goddamn, are they convenient? See, this is how you become an evil overlord. You just provide a service that's goddamn convenient.
Yeah. Give me convenience or give me death, saying the dead Kennedys, who are also prophets. How's your mic? Is your mic looking good?
I think so. How's the sound?
You sound good.
Okay.
Yeah, you sound good to me.
Good levels here.
Yeah.
That sounds like it to me.
We'll just keep it here.
Yeah. You can always take the volume and crank it up.
Yeah,
I give it a tap. Give it a tap. Tap. I have no idea what I'm saying. What are we doing tonight, boys? What's the plan?
I thought it was the Idols of the King.
Yes. Now is the winter of our discontent, or something.
Let me. I just realized I plugged this thing in and then I hit the power strip. Let me go do that real quick.
You better do that. Kieran, what are you doing? What are you typing?
I'm dealing with things.
You're dealing with things.
Yes.
All right. So when I was 10, I got this for Christmas. It is Illustrated Anthology of the Arthurian Legends. So I don't want to go so far as to say that I'm a big nerd about this, because I don't think I've read half the stuff that's in here, and I got it 35 years ago. But I've read some of it, and I've always loved the whole vibe of this era. Here's Lancelot throwing dudes off a burning bridge and killing dragons and stuff, and the sky is gold in one panel, and red with little divots on the other, because medieval cartoonists were
high as fuck.
Well, and they recognize that all flashbacks are inherently sepia colored.
Exactly. So I've always liked the Arthur Legends. I've also got a copy of Song of Roland here as well, which isn't Arthur, it's Charlemagne, but more on that in a minute. Um, so I wouldn't go so far as to call myself a nerd on this topic, but I am something of a fanboy. Now, I haven't seen all the Arthur movies that have been made. Uh, I've seen enough to know the ones that I like and don't like. I think what prompted us to want to talk about this, the Green Knight movie, that
Yes.
when the trailer dropped, like in the fall or something, that we were all like, "Hey, that looks cool! An A24 medieval epic. This sounds amazing!" And when it came out over the summer, I heard people say that they didn't like it, and then it wasn't good, and then it was kind of obtuse. So I never actually saw it. So
I did.
you did see it, all right?
Yeah.
You did see it.
So, it was an interesting take on Gawain and the Green Knight. Parts of it were definitely a little, let's say, self-indulgent. Yeah, that's a good phrase.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a bit in there where there's like inexplicable spectral naked giants, and it's not really explained how or why they are there. They're just sort of like part of the landscape,
Sure.
and the characters interact with them briefly, but you're like, what does this really have to do with, I don't know, anything?
I mean, there are giants in some of the Arthurian legends, some of the like secondary legends, like the Mad Big Gan, the Welsh one, the really Welsh one. You know the one I mean.
The extremely Welsh one that's, inherently impronounceable because Welsh. Yeah. No.
Because Welsh. So there are giants. That's part of the landscape. But yeah, I don't know why that would be there in that, because they're not in that story.
They're not, and it was interesting. Just in terms of seeing somebody do a major film adaptation where Arthur is essentially a side character. In an Arthurian story, so like that was kind of cool. They actually did a good job. The casting was really solid. They did an interesting thing where they basically had dual casting for Gawain's lady, the Morgan Le Fay
right
character, and then Arthur and Bertilac were played by the same actor.
Okay.
So they had some interesting parallels going there. I enjoyed the movie. It's not, unless you're sort of familiar with, I think you sort of have to know the legend in order to really get anything out of watching the film. I think people that were not familiar with the story, or that hadn't read it in some other format previously, probably did not get too much out of the film.
No.
But it was really interesting it was a very interesting take on that particular legend. Gawain is not quite the hero per se that he is in other versions of that story, but he's still a likable character. So that was that was an interesting take.
And this is a story you know a good deal about, Mike, because you did you've written your own version of Gawain and the Green Knight.
Yeah.
You did. I remember that.
Yeah, it was Bro Wayne and the Green Bro.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
I remember reading that, and I loved that. That was great. I remember saying so at the time. I was like, God, can we find a way to stage this? That would be amazing. Like, is there a fringe festival in Baltimore? Can we make this happen? That'd be great. Because it was a take that was very much of its moment. The whole bro culture vibe that you threw onto it, but you hit the main points of the legend, and you did so in a way that was kind of effective, and you could kind of turn the story around, and I thought that was really good. So this is a story you know a good deal about. So as you said, you could appreciate the film on a different level.
Yeah, and it was nice. It was fun for me because seeing a completely different take was not. This was a version of the story that I hadn't experienced before, so that was cool.
Yeah.
So I'd say, like, yeah, for folks that are listening, if they're thinking about seeing that film, like, if you're familiar with the legend, it can be a fun, 2-hour experience. But if you're not, it's probably a little cerebral in ways that will annoy you.
Yeah, it's what I did before we sat down here. I did sit down, and I don't normally do this because I don't normally care about the YouTube film critic universe. Mostly because some of them make good points, some of them make not so good points, but all of them are talking about cinema from the point of view of looking at its narrative, and that's incomplete when you're talking about film. Like you can critique how the story is constructed in a film, but that's only like half of what's going on in a movie. And so I don't normally pay any attention to that because most of the people who critique stuff on YouTube are lits. They're not people who've actually made movies, so they don't really understand the art form that well. And I'm not saying I do. I never went to film school, but uh, Mike, we both know lits when we see them, right?
Yeah.
We know
Oh,
lits.
yeah.
We know lits. So I did sit down and watch one YouTube review that seemed very like fair and not ranting. And he said the good was cinematography was outstanding, beautiful to look at.
Yep.
Performances were good. The problem was when the story was told in such a way that was very, it was, as you said, pretty much you needed to know this legend and a good bit of the Arthurian material pretty well in order to get what the story was telling you. Details not told to the general audience that are kind of important. You have to Google stuff to understand the meaning after the fact. It was basically made for the nerds, and that's fine, but that's going to limit its audience. So I think that's why the people are watching and being like, I don't understand this piece of crap. And yeah, that's what's happening. Now, I haven't seen it. I might sit down and decide it's awesome, but because I generally like A24 stuff. But even A24 films that I've seen, the plot is usually clear.
Mm-hmm.
You know why stuff is happening and who is doing what and why. Even stuff that's basically trippy, like the lighthouse. I don't understand everything that's happening, but I understand who these two dudes are and what they're doing, even if they're insane and, what we're perceiving might not actually be real. I understand who these guys are, so I get that. So I have enough to keep me going.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Kieran, have you seen it?
I have not, but I am also very familiar with the tale of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight as well. Though probably some of the more sterilized versions of it, because most of my introduction to Arthurian legend was through childhood, and most of those sources were pretty sterilized. Though I did at some point download a copy of Mort de la Arthur.
Yes.
In my Kindle to read, and I've gotten through most of it. The language gets me a little bit here and there, but then again, older forms of translated languages do that to me. Like old English is a motherfucker, and this isn't even old English. This is just kind of like
this is
pseudo
late,
late pseudo Shakespearean English with. Get Sir Thomas Mallory and his goddamn purple prose.
He was like 15th century, so that's like late Middle English.
Yeah, purple prose, not the goddamn.
I mean, he was a chivalrous knight. He's gonna display the education. That's who he was writing for.
Mm.
I mean, nobody else. Oh yeah, but nobody else can read, so it really is kind of superfluous,
That's exactly it. He's not writing for the groundlings. He's not Shakespeare. He doesn't have to throw a dick joke in there every now and again to keep them awake.
Yeah.
But isn't that what the Green Knight is? Just one long dick joke. If you think about it.
First of all, phrasing. Second of all, you have a point. You have a point. So I'm probably going to watch this film, but I'm probably not going to sit through it. And I'm going to go in kind of forearmed just because, it's you don't see many art house takes on Arthur.
No.
And this is an
no.
art house take on Arthur.
Yeah,
So it's
I could tell that from the previews, definitely.
it's worth looking at for that reason alone, because usually when they do Arthur movies, they're summer popcorn movies most of the time. Like there was a King Arthur movie like what 2-3 years ago
I think so, yeah.
with the dude from not Vikings.
Was that the Guy Ritchie movie?
Yeah,
Might have been. Yeah,
so.
it's the Guy Ritchie movie, and they had the guy from Sons of Anarchy. It was the guy from Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah.
And before that, I think they did it with Russell Crowe, and I think they did an Arthur. No, Clive Owens. Clive
Owens.
Sorry.
Yeah, I've seen that one. I've seen
Clive
that
Owen.
one.
I never saw that one.
Think it's dumb. Every now and again, they try to be like,
they
"Hey,
had Keira Knightley running around in it."
Keira Knightley." Yeah, it's Keira Knightley with arrows. That's pretty much all you need to know about that movie.
It is not the worst Arthurian one. The worst one was one called First Night, which had Sean Connery. Sean Connery is Arthur, but then you had Richard Gere's Lancelot, and I can't remember who Guinevere was, and I'm just like, oh God, this is terrible. I was forced to see this by an ex of mine who had a big was on a big Arthurian kick, which should have warned me, for I am fair of hair, and well, let's just say it wasn't my best friend or vassal, but it was a dark-haired dude. So
I feel you.
I hope you don't actually, but yes.
That movie's terrible. That was something my mom rented, and because Richard Gere, and I watched it, and it was dumb. Like they didn't even bother making Mordred the villain. They gave him some other goofy Hollywood name that sort of sounds like Mordred but isn't Mordred, so they can say that they're doing something that's new and different. And it was like half the plot of Excalibur turned into a movie of the week.
Yeah, and it's not like, and look, I get it. I can live with Arthurian tellings without the magic or Merlin or none of that, because the story can hold up on its own relatively well without that, especially if you just decide to cover it post him being king.
Yeah.
But I don't really think anyone, with a single caveat to that, has done it as well as Excalibur did. Excalibur hit all the notes. It had Helen Mirren in it. It had Patrick Stewart in it. It had a bunch of other people whose names I can't remember because it's not important to me to remember right now.
Gabriel Byrne, that's right.
Gabriel Byrne, a lot, and it was well done. And
we could praise Excalibur all night long, and we probably will. We will, because it's probably, you're absolutely right, Kieran. It's the best film adaptation of that series. But to go back to the Clive Owen one for a second, what I liked about that is they tried to do the historical grounding. They that was a selling point, as I remember. It was this is they tried to okay, we're going to do 5th century Britain. This guy, if he existed, he was probably a Roman Dux Bellorum. He probably had, they were kind of here's the point where the Roman Empire withdrew from Britain, and they tried to ground it. And I thought that was an interesting take. I don't know that the movie quite hit all the notes, but I like the fact that it was basically about the Saxon invasions.
Well, and I mean, there are other Arthurian legends where they do specifically try to tie Arthur and the court back to the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's one where it's I think it's called the Knight of the Surcoat, which is another Gawain-centric story, but it's basically the story of how
I've not heard of that.
They how the Britons essentially learn the old secret of Greek fire, the siege weapon.
Oh, cool!
The naval weapon, from Gawain.
Mm-hmm.
He basically is hey, I've got this figured out, guys. Let's go get this stuff and build this. And it's an interesting take, but they throughout that particular story, there's a lot of talk about how they're descended from the noble Romans, blah 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 blah, and it's like they're trying to tie it all back
Yeah.
to the sort of the prior empire. It's sort of like this is a legitimate kingdom kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an interesting legend as well. The Knight of the Surcoat, that was a fun one.
I'll have to take a look at that. Mary Stuart wrote a trilogy in the 70s and 80s that kind of did the same thing, and there was a lot of that. I mean, she had the mystical Merlin stuff because Merlin is actually the narrator character,
Okay.
so it's told from Merlin's point of view, which is fun. And but it's the same thing. It's like the collapse of Roman Britain, and the Saxons are coming in, and Arthur becomes the savior of the Britons, and so on and so forth. And it's I don't want to call it magical realism, because what does that mean?
Right.
There's actual magic in it, but it's a grounded kind of a magic, like what we see in Excalibur, where there are rules. And if you break the rules, then there will be consequences to your behavior. So, one thing we might do is, before we start praising Excalibur to the heavens, as must happen, we could kind of wonder, because I'm sitting here wondering, talking about this, like, why does Hollywood keep coming back to this well? That's pretty much all they do now, is like go back to the well, remake this, reboot this, recreate this, have a soft reboot of this. But, this has been an ongoing thing. Like every now and again we see a new King Arthur, like every now and again we see a new Robin Hood. But it feels like Arthur, they've been doing more. So what do we think? What is it about this guy?
I mean, I wouldn't speculate that it would be necessarily due to the age of the story, because I've seen maybe a total of maybe 5 interpretations of Beowulf at best, and they don't go back to that very often.
No, that's true.
They don't go back to that very often. And even at least one of the interpretations I saw was like the Michael Crichton 13th Warrior interpretation of Beowulf, which I found to be good, but that's just me.
I actually ended up liking that movie. That was kind of, I wasn't expecting to like it, but did.
The trailer's dog shit, but the movie itself's good.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it's age, because Beowulf predates the Arthurian tale by quite a bit.
Does it?
Oh yeah. Beowulf started out as oral tradition, like it's an ancient tale.
All right, cool.
It's real old.
Okay.
The Arthurian legend is indicative of older stories. I mean, it too probably comes from an original oral tradition, but what was done with it is they took a bunch of ancient tales and put them together, and then strung them together in, for what was them, modern parlance and settings.
Right.
Like Camelot as depicted is clearly not some 1st, 3rd, or 4th century civilization or anything. It's very clearly medieval. It's very clearly from that time, set in the time of when Mallory would have put together these tales and translated them, from that time of chivalry, or what counted for chivalry and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which was not an old concept at that time, or not terribly old anyway.
Yeah.
My memory serves me correct, which it may not.
I mean, if you look at the Song of Roland, which was written around pretty close to the time of the events it's describing, there's very little. The chivalric tradition that has existed in Charlemagne's time in the 8th and 9th centuries was very rudimentary and crude, and looked nothing like what would be considered chivalrous even a few centuries later.
Well, chivalry was introduced to basically prevent knights from wilding out in peace times.
Yeah.
Because they would lose their goddamn minds, because they're bored. Because, we fight and we fight and we kill and we drink and we fight and we fight and we burn and we pillage and we fight and we fight. Well, there's no fighting and fighting to do. Let's go do this freelance. No. We can't have that. Can't have that. So you get chivalry.
How do you manage a warrior aristocracy? You give them ideals.
You give them ideals and other ideas than what they're naturally going to fall back on, which you don't want them doing.
Right.
And so, so Arthur, a lot of elements of Arthur were fairly modern for when they were being introduced, but it had, seeds in older times. And I think the appeal of it is of a golden age that never was. People really love that shit. I mean, it's even done in modern times with this country of, let's take this country back to when it was great. Like, okay, that's a little myopic because if you go back and look realistically, there's never really been that golden of a time.
No.
No, you just don't want to talk about it. Is all.
It's a sense of nostalgia, and nostalgia always looks back with rose-colored glasses.
Well, and I to sort of piggyback on what Kieran was saying, but then also to sort of try to answer your question, Andrew. I mean, I think Hollywood keeps going back to the Arthur well, because in many ways, it's a story that has a lot of really popular components for film. You have idealism. You have, nostalgia. You have, a heroic arc. There's intrigue. You have tragedy. It kind of has.
Yeah.
Most of the major themes that you would have in like any sort of like epic narrative.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's probably a pretty good reason for why Hollywood keeps going back to it. And like Kieran was basically saying, it's this like sort of nostalgia, it's this like longing for a golden time that never existed. And I think that also there's something inherently aspirational about like the Arthur mythos.
Yeah.
He's a good portion of a lot of the versions of events is either him trying to be good enough to become king, or then once he's king, he's trying to, build his court and to get, the best knights to come and like join him in Camelot, that whole thing. And there's, it's aspirational. Of course, a bunch of stuff goes wrong. He's a fallible individual himself.
The serpent sneaks into the garden.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and this is probably why Disney only made a movie about Arthur, about him becoming King Arthur, not him being King Arthur.
I'd forgotten about that movie.
Sword in the Stone was a good Disney film. That was a banger.
I saw that so many times when I was in elementary school. Like, it was one of the handful of films that they would sit us down in the multi-purpose room and we would watch that.
Yeah.
I think I saw that every year in elementary school, like at the end of the school year. So it's weird that I forgot about it. I don't think I liked it very much. I think I was just like, he's a fish now. What? Why? What? Why is he a fish? What is happening?
Yeah, he's emotionally disappointing a squirrel. Man. I don't know. Maybe that speaks to his later flaws in life. If he can break the heart of a girl squirrel,
Disney in the 60s and 70s was doing some strange things, adapting strange things, like adapting Kipling. Can you imagine them doing that today if Jungle Book wasn't already a hit?
No.
I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening. I think another thing that Arthur has going for him is precisely that, because there's so much of him as myth and legend, you have some wiggle room for creativity. Whereas you might not if you want to center a medieval epic on someone who actually existed. If you want to make a movie about Richard the Lionhearted, you've got to deal with an actual man who existed and did things, and you're going to end up shaving a bunch of stuff out, and people are going to get annoyed by that, and reasonably so. But with Arthur, there are certain points to the legend that you can just hit, and people will be like, it's about right. And you can have something as staid and stodgy as First Night, and something as kind of like bending of the genre as the Clive Owens Arthur, and they both kind of like, That'll work. They can both be. That's a King Arthur story.
You're very right. It's such an archetypical kind of story with all kind, and you can tilt it and move it around to make any kind of point you particularly want to.
Yeah.
And I would dare say that any director can make a King Arthur movie. Maybe not a good one, like Michael Bay played around with it, but
don't give him ideas.
Oh. But like, just about anyone can come up with a fair. I mean, just another example of running around and playing with King Arthur and getting out of what you want. Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail. I mean,
exactly.
And that is, bar none, a great movie.
Well, yeah. it's quite possibly the best parody of something that's ever been made.
Very historically accurate in the costuming, though.
That's what I was going to say. That's actually what makes it funny, is the fact that they go whole hog into the production value. Like, the production value on Monty Python and the Holy Grail is as good as Excalibur.
Oh, yeah.
And it came first. Holy Grail, Monty Python was first, was 1974. Excalibur was like 1980. And I, for one, am convinced that John Boorman saw Monty Python and the Holy Grail and said, this, but unironically.
Yeah.
Because what makes it funny is how much production value and how much chainmail they're wearing and how much they're totally in the moment and they never break character, so that when they walk around banging two halves of coconuts together, that's like the first shot of the movie, and it's still funny because they're so committed to it. Why do you have coconuts? Why don't you have horses? And he's like, why are you asking me? Can I come in your castle or not? This is a stupid conversation that we're having. I have coconuts. Let it go.
European or African spells? I don't know that.
Of course, an African swallow is not my great rate. I give up.
It's a simple matter of weight ratios.
Yeah, that movie's funny because of how good it looks and how much like a medieval epic it looks. So when they make fun of it, with just pure absurdity, which was always what Python was great at, like never break character. Just hold the joke in your face like it's going right through you, and nobody sees it except the audience, and they can laugh. You don't get to laugh. You're not being funny. That's what makes it funny. And
how do you know he's king? He's the only one without shit.
That line's hilarious because it's exactly what a peasant might say. It's the truth. It's the truth. He's a king. He has a servant, and his clothes are not covered in filth. He's a king. He has a sword. Like, do I have to paint you a picture, dude? Come on.
I don't remember voting for you. You didn't vote for a king.
Strange lying in the bottom of pond is not a racist performance of the government.
That's the only moment where they get modernistic on it. And they do that judiciously, which I thought was good. Because you could very easily spend the whole movie doing that. And then it would be like... it would be one of those like joke parody crap films, like Not Another Teen Movie.
Yeah, something like that.
And
like parody done well is rare, but the Pythons nailed it. Yeah. And you can tell they have a love for the source material.
Yes.
It's not the haha, we're making fun of this thing because it's stupid. It's haha, we're making fun of this thing because we love it.
Yes. Yes, like these are Englishmen who went to English public schools and were educated, and they all read Gawain and the Green Knight, and they all knew their material and were fans of it, and that's why they said this would make an incredibly funny thing to make fun of. And it was done with love.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And every time I watch Python and the Holy Grail, and they get to the part with the castle, and they're on the boat with the dragon ship, I have this wonderful moment where it's like, I wish this wasn't a parody. I wish they could actually fight a battle and win the Holy Grail right now. Like, this looks like Conan or something. I want this movie to change gears right now, and it never does.
Yeah.
It's like watching Jaws. The shark never wins.
And that's probably like what you said. The director of Excalibur said, "Damn it, I'm going to make my own King Arthur without the hookers and blackjack."
Yeah.
Well done, Kieran. Well done.
Like I watched that again. When was it? A couple years ago? I did had to watch because I had seen Excalibur so long ago that it was misremembered in my brain. Like I'm like I have flashes and glints of it, but like I know I'm forgetting a bunch of shit. And I went back and watched it again. I'm like, oh, this is the stuff.
Yeah,
This is the stuff, man. This is
it's complete. It's the whole Arthur legend,
Basically, yeah.
from conception to death.
And visually glorious.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well acted. Well acted,
and the pacing's great. Like, it never drags, you know. And they're covering a lot of ground, but each scene sits right. It has just the right pace. It does just what it needs to do to keep the story going. But you get that wonderful sense of the passage of time.
Right.
And they cover a lot of ground in a reasonable amount of time. What is the movie, like 2 hours?
Yeah,
something like that. I
No,
think
it's not super long.
No,
but it feels about 2 hours, and it's. I got it for DVD a little while ago. It was on not DVD, Blu-ray, and man,
I think I watched it on Amazon Prime not too long ago.
It's so good.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's definitely worth a look. And again, like we've said at the beginning, this probably to this date one of the better, if not the best, King Arthur interpretations on cinema. Now, I'd be interesting to see how the Japanese would handle it.
Oh.
1 hour and what?
1 hour 59 minutes. Excalibur. Also, Liam
Almost
Neeson's
2 hours.
Boorman.
Ah, right. Liam Neeson's in that. That's true.
Liam Neeson. Oh, that is right. Isn't he the one who finds the Grail, or is that no? That's Percival.
Wait.
No,
That's
Percival.
Percival.
He doesn't play Percival. He plays Gawain.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Hence the subject of the Green Knight and Gawain.
Yeah.
Like it's been done so many times. Like I'm almost positive that there's probably a black and white silent film version of Arthur.
Oh, gotta be.
Someone probably, I don't think there's a German expressionist version of King Arthur, though that would be interesting as fuck.
There might be there could exist is a German expressionist version of Parzival.
Probably
because what's in my anthology is the Wolfram von Ensbach version of the Percival legend, Parzival. So there might be, because that's where the legend went to Germany, and for some reason that took off in the German medieval culture, was specifically Parzival, and the hunt for the Holy Grail, which is another super strange legendary piece of thing in itself, the Holy Grail. I just sat down with my daughters last night, and we watched Raiders of the Lost Ark for the first time.
Oh.
Okay, yeah.
I hadn't watched it in a really long time. My daughters had never seen it, and they loved it because it's Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's amazing, and one of the things that I always liked about the early Indiana Jones movies was always the fact that you have these pulpy action adventure stories with this very pulpy semi-anti-hero protagonist. He's a little bit dirty, he's a little bit gritty, he's more of a grave robber than an archaeologist, blah, 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 blah. There's always something shady going on in his past. But all those movies have this encounter with this sacred object. And he kind of, he gets to survive because he knows not to touch it. He has that moment of realization, like, oh, they're opening the Ark of the Covenant. I'm going to close your eyes. Close your eyes. I remember enough of the Old Testament. Close your eyes. And it's the same with the Holy Grail. It's like, you can't actually take this out into the world.
Right.
And, That's kind of how Grail legends work, Arthur legends work. Like you can encounter the divine, the sacred object, but you can't actually seize control of it. So
Yeah, that follows.
yeah, which is why one of the things I like about Excalibur is that they actually find the Grail and use it. Because in Parzival Percival screws up.
Right.
And doesn't answer the question correctly, and doesn't get another chance to answer the whom does the Grail serve. He doesn't get a second chance. He screws it up, and he wanders the rest of his life forever, having failed. And a lot of what's in that particular German Parzival legend got put into the Excalibur film. You know, the dying king who needs the Grail is from that.
And tied up, I believe, also tied up into. A lot of the Arthurian, and please correct me, gentlemen, if I'm wrong on this, is the Fisher King.
See, I don't know anything about that.
I used to know, outside of the movie, I used to know a little bit about that.
I've never even seen that movie. I know what you're talking about, and I know that it's a thing, and it's Arthur related, but I never saw it.
The Fisher King movie, which is a Terry Gilliam one, I believe.
That makes sense.
I know Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
Robin Williams, Jeff Bridges.
Right.
It's a redemption tale, but centered in it is because Robin Williams' character believes himself to be a knight questing for the Grail.
Mm-hmm.
And I am forgetting so many details of this movie that I cannot do it justice, but it is Arthurian related. And that was I just remember that was a really good one. And if I would have thought of it earlier before the podcast, I would have gone and given a rewatch, or at least gone and read up an entry to brush up on it.
Yeah.
But I did not.
Yeah, I seem to recall the legend of the Fisher King is it's like, it's sort of the king of whatever land is born, but he's incomplete or crippled or injured in some way.
Yeah.
And in Gilliam's movie, Williams's character is he's a schizophrenic, with like daylight hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
But that also fits, the sort of the legend essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty good film. Like, I enjoyed it. I think it's a good one. Visually pretty striking.
Mm-hmm.
And if I might also address other mediums of Arthurian tales, there is a graphic novel that DC did called Camelot 3000, which is a future tale of the once and future king finally returning to the future. It comes back to the future. So it takes place. It's a sci-fi epic wherein all the characters are reincarnated.
Okay.
That's a fun one.
It's a good one. It's one of their mature graphic novels. So along the lines of like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns, it's like in that vein.
Yeah.
I read it a long time ago. I recall it being quite good. The art was really good. The storytelling was really good. They do address the Holy Grail in that.
Mm-hmm.
And another one, and I know you'd be familiar with this one, Mike, is Matt Wagner's Mage series.
Yes.
Specifically the first one, The Hero Reborn, which is the tale of Kevin Matchstick, who is Arthur incarnate or reincarnate in modern times. And the Lady of the Lake drives around in Edsel, and her name is Edsel. And you have the mage, Mirth, who is the opponent's mage, who is, Merlin.
Mm-hmm.
But Kevin Matchstick doesn't know that he's Arthur incarnate. It's just he keeps running into weird shit like the Grackle Flints and the Umber Sprite. The Fisher King they're searching for him. There's a dragon. There's a giant. One of his friends is a ghost who didn't know he was a ghost because he didn't realize he was dead. There's trolls, giants, and of course Kevin is completely prepared for this nonsense.
Right.
It's really well done. It's done back in the 80s. I haven't read it in forever. They did a continuation of the original story later on in the 90s.
Matt Wagner just finished it.
No, did he?
Yeah, he just finished it in the last, I want to say 3-4 years. He finally came back and did, because he did the first 2 volumes of Mage, and it was sort of stuck for a couple of decades, and then Wagner finally came back and did the last bit of the story. So
good.
If it's been collected into one book yet, I'll have to.
You're probably going to get it in 3 volumes because you got the first one, The Hero Reborn, then The Hero Discovered is the second one. I haven't read any of that, and I guess the third one is
Denied or something like
The
that.
Hero Denied, something like that. Yeah. His whole big, and I can imagine how it probably ends if he keeps to Arthurian, and he's not strictly connected.
Mm-hmm.
That in the Hero Discovered, he runs into other heroes like the Olympian, who is Hercules, who has a denim jacket with a big old lion patch on the back of it.
Awesome.
Stuff like that. A couple other of folk heroes are in it as well. There's a lot you can do with the Arthurian legend in a lot of different media.
Yeah, and there's it's a folk legend basically.
Yeah, basically.
That became a big bestseller in the Middle Ages, and
and even today,
it's the original intellectual property, and they just keep rebooting it. So there's a whole list here on the I looked at the Wikipedia entry on the Fisher King, and it's the wounded king or the maimed king. It's part of the Grail legend. And there is a whole bunch of, according to them, modern versions of the legend. Supposedly The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot has to do with the Fisher King. C.S. Lewis has Fisher King elements in That Hideous Strength. And do you remember The Natural?
Yeah.
The movie?
Mm-hmm.
The movie about the baseball?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Robert Redford, I believe.
Robert Redford, yeah. Right. There's a character called Pop Fisher.
Right.
Yeah. So that makes Robert Redford the Percival figure, I guess.
Well, maybe even slightly Arthurian because of the bat. That is Excalibur.
Excalibur. Yeah.
Excalibur.
Excalibur. It was made by lightning. It's a magical bat, and then he knocks a baseball through a light, and it keeps going until it hits Mars or something. I don't know. And then he's bleeding, and then he's throwing a baseball. It's
weird.
It's weird. It's one of those movies I watched when I was young and did not understand it.
There's a lot of movies I watched when I was young that I did not understand.
Did not understand that film. Why is he doing this? Why did she shoot him? I still don't understand that.
Yeah, I did. Hell, man, I saw Blazing Saddles when I was really young, and I thought it was very funny. But then again, Blazing Saddles is very funny.
It is very funny.
Did not understand it till I saw it much later, but that is neither here nor there. Yeah. The Arthur. There's so many moving parts to the Arthurian legend outside of just Arthur. There's Sir Pellinor and the Questing Beast. There's Tristan and Isolda. I can't get her fucking last name.
Well, it depends on what language you're saying it in. It could be Isolde. It could be Isolda.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about is the point, though.
Her.
There's that part of it. Of course, there's the Arthur, Lancelot, Guinevere part of it.
Which is just marrying the Tristan and Isolde story. So yeah.
So you get that double over, and then you've got the whole Morgan Le Fay, Nemu, which is a separate character. Which they kind of married the characters of Morgan Le Fay and Nemu into Excalibur because Nemu was she a sylph or a sprite? She was a female creature magical creature that that was the student of Merlin, and he lusted after her, and so she used that to trap him.
Yes, that's in the Mary Stuart trilogy as well. It's like they're two separate characters, though. Morgan is separate from Nimue, but in the Excalibur film, they're the same character.
They're kind of the same character. As far as I know, in every telling of Arthur I've ever heard, Morgan Le Fay is definitely Arthur's half sister, though not in every version I've heard of it does she necessarily know that herself.
Yeah, but that appears, and that is one through line that they just can't keep away from. It's like, this is his sister, and he makes the baby with her. I don't know why they love that so much, but they love going there.
Years later, modern pornography would latch on to that, so there you go. And the Japanese.
How dare you, sir?
And the Japanese.
I always kind of wondered if the whole bit with Mordred was sort of like a roundabout way to basically be like, don't commit incest. Because if you commit incest, your horrible monster child is going to come back and fucking kill you.
To quote Preacher, man or God, you can't fuck your sister and expect anything good to come from it.
Facts. That is definitely a through line that appears through all forms of ancient mythology, including the Old Testament, where patriarchs keep marrying their cousins and having several wives and concubines, and it always leads to disaster.
Abraham's half sister Sarah, he was married to. And God's like, sacrifice your inbred spawn. And though that may have been far enough back in the genealogical record that there wouldn't have had as much chance to be harmful genetics to have built up yet through thousands and thousands of generations of humankind. So it may have actually been a safer thing to do.
I think Sarah wasn't actually Abraham's sister. I think there was a time when they were passing through a city, and he claimed, right? He told her she was his sister, so the king wouldn't get all like, "Hey, I'm steal your wife and get you." And then it always happens that the king is like, "Why did you tell me she was your sister? I would have left her alone if I known she was your wife. What kind of monster do you take me for?" And Abraham's like, "My bad, dog. I'm gonna roll on out of here. It's fine." Look, man, why don't you and take your wife with you?
Like, look, man, do you know what the Philistines put me through? You really want to know? The Palestine, sorry.
But same word.
Yeah, it's just. Yeah, and that just some of the interesting things in the King Arthur legend, arcing back to that, it's the Grail. All right, the Grail, brought by Joseph of Arimathea.
Mm-hmm. A member of the Sanhedrin.
And it's like, okay, so you're trying to tell me that, and historically it ended up that travel like that could happen, but you're trying to tell me some guy from around 1 AD in, Judea went his ass all the way over to the British Empire just to drop off a cup.
Well, that's just it. They were all part of the Roman Empire in those days.
Yeah. True.
All roads lead to Rome.
Right. True, but why would you want to go to ass-freezing Britain?
If you wanted to keep something hidden, that was a good place to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
I was looking for something. There is... Yeah, check it out. In my thing, there's a legend here. There, you can't really see it very well, but Lancelot gets told he can open up a rich tomb, and it's the tomb of his ancestor, who's the son of Joseph of Arimathea. So I always remembered that because at the time I read this, it was a boy. I was like, "Who's Joseph of Arimathea?" I don't know who that is. Now I know. I was like, yeah. You free Arthur's subjects held captive in the land of Gore will be able to cover a rich tomb in the cemetery. Where's the land of Gore? Gorre.
Oh, okay. That's a lot better than what I thought it was. Because you knock off an R and an E and you get an entirely different series.
The land of Gore.
You get an entirely different series then.
Yeah.
Which maybe that is a touchstone for another day, let me tell you.
Indeed, sir.
We're going to have to one day do a podcast on bad literature.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Bad, redundant literature.
We could talk about the worst fantasy story of all time.
The Eye of Aragon.
The Eye of Argon.
Oh,
You both knew immediately.
that guy was 14 when he wrote that. I really feel bad for him. Like, he didn't know what he was doing.
actually, that is in fact the defense given by the guy who's the basis for the comedy website me and Mike read back in the day, Transformers World's Worst Fanfic. And the guy who wrote all these terrible fanfics was like, look, man, I was like a 12-year-old kid at the time when I wrote this, and I love Transformers and Beast Wars, and this is just what this came up with. So,
You can't. Yeah.
there was even an Arthurian episode of Transformers, a Decepticon in King Arthur's court.
I don't remember that.
That is where a couple of Autobots, like 3 or 4 Autobots, and then Starscream and a couple of Decepticons end up in the past.
So this is an early Transformers episode.
Season 1, Season 2, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Before the movie. Yeah. Well before the movie, yeah. And it's Starscream tries to take over like medieval Britain, and then but they're having problems trying to power themselves up because there's not like any,
There's no industry. Yeah, it's
no industry yet. So they figure out some way to make a bunch of people push a fucking thing that wheel like from Conan to a generator to charge them back up or some shit. And then Merlin shows up and just uses lightning to recharge the Autobots because he's baller like that.
Yeah.
Like that. Or some shit.
Man,
I can watch. It's free on YouTube to watch right now. I can honestly go and watch that episode again. But
the Decepticon in King Arthur's court. I both have no memory of that occurring, and yet 100% believe that happened.
It's better than the. It's better than the Transformers Evil Discotheque episode.
It is also better than the Thundercats episode where. Okay.
You don't need to finish that sentence. The Thundercats episode.
I do, because it's going to hurt you, and I hurt too. So,
it's
Thundercats transforms himself into King Arthur, right? Oh, and uses looking King Arthur to trick the lady in the lake into giving him Excalibur, which legitimizes him as King Arthur. And though he goes to challenge Lion-O and the Sword of Omens, and so Excalibur and the Sword of Omens fly from the sky and start fighting each other.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
And then, like, the Excalibur stabs through the Sword of Omens and, like, quotes, kills it, but then realizes in doing so the Sword of Omens and the Thundercats are virtuous, and then rejects Mumra, and, it's... I don't know that every 80s cartoon did a King Arthur episode, but...
Probably. There's probably a Smurfs King Arthur episode somewhere.
I think actually Smurfs is actually maybe set in that time period, so...
Yeah, but it's French.
It is.
Mort de l'Arthur, Lancelot du Lac.
Yeah, but Thomas Mallory was an English knight.
Who translated it from the original French.
Okay, I take your point. I'm just saying that the French have their own Charlemagne legends. They got like Song of Roland and such.
They do, yes. But
Charlemagne, like I was saying, was an actual dude who did actual stuff, and we don't have to.
As was Roland.
We don't have to argue about whether he existed or not. There's a lot of extensive records, and so you can't shove the legend too far with him because
no.
At some point, he sheds the blood of Saxon men, and you just have to accept that. That's one thing Charlemagne and Arthur have in common.
Yep.
Killing Saxons.
Also, with Roland, you have a mysterious sword, which the Sword of Roland supposedly still exists in a stone in Spain, I think it is.
Oh.
Probably.
And it has a chain wrapped around it, so no one tries to take it out.
Interesting.
But it's this ancient medieval sword stuck in the cliffside that you can go see. Durandal. It is Durandal, the sword of Roland.
I'm looking this up. I'm looking at Durandal.
That's the original Durandal. Okay, gotcha.
There were three swords of that epic: Durandal, Joyeuse, and Cortana.
Right, Joyeuse was Charlemagne's sword.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Which, interestingly enough, Bungie has used both Durandal and Cortana as names of AIs in both Halo, and the one that came before it. I can't remember what it's called. It was a sci-fi third-person shooter that they had back on the Macintosh way back. Marathon, where you were guided by the mad AI Durandal, who had gone rampant.
Interesting.
Which the idea of rampant AI shows up later in Halo.
I'm looking at the sword right now. A picture of it on Wikipedia. Yeah, that is an old rusty sword stuck in a rock. That's so wild.
Isn't it?
That blows my mind. That fills me with joy. I am joyeuse as a consequence of that's amazing.
There are a few legendary swords that actually do exist. There is the Kusanagi blade of one of the 3 imperial relics of Japan. One is a mirror, one is a sword, and one is a little like half of a yin yang looking gem.
Mm-hmm.
They're the imperial relics of Japan, and supposedly only the emperor and the monks that look after them get to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So you get kind of the relic sword finds its way through
it's the
multiple cultures.
That's what we're talking about with the sacred object and the sacred blade as a powerful entity, a sacred blade of kings,
blade of kings,
which marks them as people of divinely chosen and having authority, and that's like the most essential part of the Arthur legend is that he was chosen as a redeemer and a savior, and he was ultimately unsuccessful.
No, for he is but man.
Right.
For he is but man. And I can see how that works because I know a few blacksmiths, and I know the amount of time and effort, even with having modern techniques and materials, of what it takes to make a really good sword. And back then, it would have been even harder because they wouldn't have really understood a lot of the scientific basis behind what they were doing. I did this thing and it worked. It's like when you get to Japanese swords, the reason the katana is curved is part of the forging method because they had very shitty iron. That's why they had to fold it a bunch of times to knock out the sulfur and the phosphorus and work that out of the blade because otherwise they would have had a blade with a lot of sulfur and phosphorus in it, which would have made it more brittle and not as good. So the folding technique is because they started out with bad materials to start with. And so they needed to beat the impurities out to get themselves good materials.
Right.
That's why you have that process. Whereas the Spanish steel, Toledo steel, was renowned. And then you have the Damascus steel, which was in fact not like a pattern welding like we see today, but was a result of this specific ore that was mined out of the Palestine, actually, and brought to Damascus, and then forged from that. And that specific ore would form the patterns in the blade and give it that superior technique. They actually recreated it by going to like those old mines and pulling the ore out of it and like firing up, making essentially, and I could be wrong here, a type of crucible steel out of it, and then making a blade out of it.
That makes sense.
But to do that, to make a sword for someone, that was a lot of man hours, and therefore justifiably as a craftsman, a lot of gold to pay for that. And therefore you would have to be some kind of royalty to get a sword that essentially, if you were to compare it to a mass-produced sword made by tool steel today, would be, not particularly superior or any way, material science-wise, because we can make these things quick now. But at the time would have seemed almost magical in its durability and edge retention and ability to cut lesser swords pretty much in half because the lesser swords were made with shittier steel and were mass-produced and were, more mass-produced, not in a factory, but, not the kind of care and effort put into it.
Yeah. And a well-made sword in the hands of someone who's been trained his entire life in how to use it can cut his way through any number of peasants armed with sticks on a medieval battlefield. and so it just becomes an arms race of what happens when a knight fights a knight, which is why those are the only interesting parts of medieval battles that anyone talks about or writes down. Because okay, we ran over all the peasants, and then it got good.
Which
we had
makes
a massacre, and then we actually fought the people that could resist us. Yeah,
and it's kind of funny because how King Richard died, if I recall correctly, he was shot by a crossbow by a peasant.
Correct.
A peasant's boy.
Correct. And because he was
like,
Richard the Lionhearted, he forgave the peasant boy before he died because, of
he's
course,
magnanimous that way.
Because he's Richard the Lionhearted. Yeah.
I mean, you can't get called the Lionhearted. That's a hell of a compliment in medieval Europe.
Yeah, he was a legend in his own right. He made friends with Saladin while they were trying to kill each other, which is pretty impressive. Two guys who had absolutely no reason to like each other.
Well, the Crusades, which happened for a number of reasons, was also kind of part of that. Let's keep the knights busy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's keep the knights. First off, let's get them the fuck out of our country, and let's keep them busy.
I think that that part of the Crusades is a little overstated. I think when you're getting down to like the later Crusades, that may have been the case. But on the first Crusade, you had like counts and dukes mortgaging their estates so they can go. This was like there was a moment of like, let's do it. Big thing. Let's do the thing. All my sins forgiven. Sign me up. Let's go. And I think later on things got stupid. Like Fourth Crusade was just like one of those things that if you put it in a novel, people wouldn't believe it, and it happened. It actually happened, and it's like just this comedy of error on comedy of error, and now we're sacking Constantinople, and why are we doing this? It seemed like it was the idea at the time. Things happened. Yeah. Things happen, bro.
Things happen, and we got a "We Might Be Giants" song out of it. So there you go. So funny related. I used to work with a guy from Istanbul, and he argued that the Turks make the better dolmades, and everyone I've met from Greece argues they invented it and make the better dolmades. Like, it's funny, a lot of Greek and Turkish food, the Turks and the Greeks will both argue who originated it and who makes the better one. Uh-huh. It's a big old thing.
Yeah, that sounds exactly like what I would expect to happen.
Everyone from the Middle East will tell you that their country invented hummus. And that their way is the original way.
Yeah. We invented this. No, we invented this. No, we invented this.
Meanwhile, I'm sitting on the side like, yo, man, another tin of dolmades. These things are baller.
Yeah, can I just more? Is there more? That's what I want.
Yo, cut me off some of that chicken souvlaki, man. Like, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And really, out of the three of us, I don't know about you, Andrew, but I know for a fact Mike can tell you about some authentic Greek cooking.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I lived there for like 4 years, but
did you?
Oh yeah.
You told me that. Yeah.
Him and Eleni are the two people I go to about authentic Greek food because her dad owns a Souvlaki stand in Greece. She's part Greek, so like whenever I'd find a Greek restaurant and she's in town, like, yo, let me know how authentic this is. It's a good Greek restaurant,
Yeah.
Her tester dish for that would be moussaka.
Oh yeah, no, that's a good one to test. I don't care for the dish personally, but
it's okay.
If a place does have good moussaka, like it's
I mean, I prefer spanakopita, and not just for the Venture Brothers reference.
It's immediately where my mind went. Spanakopita.
Never have gotten to get good Greek wine. I mean, and I've heard you just can't get in the States, but the good Greek wine is made on such a small production level that the Greek wine industry isn't like, say, the Italian wine industry or the French wine industry or the Spanish wine industry.
It depends on like what you're looking for, and
I've never had Greek wine. I'd forgotten such a thing existed.
It's harder to get here.
Really hard to get.
But it's
the Greeks have been doing it for thousands of years, man.
It's also like it depends on what you're trying to get. I mean, there's also like Retsina, which is the white, sort of like the one of the most iconic like white wines that comes out of Greece, but it's definitely an acquired taste, and it's also it's a very young wine. It's generally aged in pine casks. And it takes on the flavor of the resin, but like you can actually have a vintner who makes the wine, like every year, and you can find a vintner that you like, and you go to them, and it's their Retsina that you buy, and even if that's all the Retsina that you drink, every vintage will be pretty different. It's a very variable wine, so it's interesting. If you can actually find somebody that consistently makes good Retsina, stick with it, because it's rare.
Okay.
Like if Greece could get themselves together a really good export system going with their wines and get their tourism up more based off of just the ancient Greek historical mythological aspects of it, I feel they could really fix a lot of their economic problems, which are probably more complicated than that. But those right there are some firm revenue streams.
I mean, they're part of the EU, so I don't know what's going on.
They got in on the ground floor for the EU.
This conversation is making me thirsty.
I mean,
I'm going to get a beer. I'll be right back.
it is known.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Oh, we will.
The Holy Roman Empire is neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Discuss.
Discuss.
Yeah. Does the Green Knight get his head chopped off in the story? Because I don't.
Yeah. Yes, in the story, he gets his head chopped off.
Okay. Because like I said, I don't know if I've ever actually sat down and read it. And when I read Browayne and the Green Bro, I don't remember if that happened as well.
Yep.
It sort of did, I recall.
Yep.
Yeah, no. One of the central things about the Green Knight is that the Green Knight shows up. He's like a magical being, and he challenges whoever challenges one of Arthur's knights to strike his head off, and everyone's terrified, pissed, scared of him. And then Gawain, stands up to do it and does it. And then I don't know if the knight says this before or after, like, cool, I get to do this to you in a year. Come seek me out.
That's right.
The setup is, strike me, and then a year and a day from now, I will return whatever has been given to me. And, Gawain is like, well, if I just kill this dude, then... Solved, right?
So yeah, sure.
He might have been better off Rochambeauing him, but I mean,
that's always the right decision. when possible, go for the Rochambeau.
But yeah, and it wraps basically, and then he goes searching for the Green Knight, and he finds. Yeah.
It's a chivalrous way to do Rochambeau.
Yeah, they call it jousting. Shit, man, I didn't even, we could have worked in a commentary about the Knight's Tale in this episode. Oh, well, another time. But that's a story for another
time. And no,
a time we will mysteriously never get to.
That's the first of never.
Shit, I might have to do my own podcast called "That's a Story for Another Time."
That's a story for another time. What was I going to say? The music in Excalibur. I remember having a note about the music in Excalibur, and it's
Fortuna.
Yes, and I would like it if no other film ever used that piece of music again, because. Not that I don't like Carmina Burana. I love Carmina Burana, but I don't think it can be used better than it was used in Excalibur.
No, absolutely not. Like that's just raising the hairs on the back of your neck thrilling.
Right. And then they use the death of they use Wagner at the end. The funeral of Siegfried at the end for that wonderful piece of tragicness and the ship going across the sea to Avalon.
And for an older generation, I'd be like, Wagner, not just for a Bugs Bunny cartoon, but...
Hey, my girls watch Bugs Bunny cartoons on a Saturday morning.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. What's Opera Doc? Classic episode.
That's how all of us learned Wagner.
That is how we all learned Wagner.
Kill the wabbit, kill the wabbit.
Or, oh, Brunhilde, you're so lovely. Yes, I know it. I can't help it.
Shoot.
It's an opera. What'd you expect? A happy ending?
This is really not where I thought this conversation was going to end up when we got started 2 hours ago.
Wait a sec, ever. We'll probably cut this in post. I mean, Jesus.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start like I said on the Discord, I'm going to start like throwing some of this stuff in here that normally I've been leaving on the cutting room floor and just like putting them as like bonus episodes on the Patreon. So like all this stuff is going to be in public, Kieran, now. Like this is the new policy. I'm just going to shrink the official to the actually part where we were talking about Excalibur.
I say,
which is awesome and everyone should see it.
Oh, yes.
What we were trying to make.
Look, I say nothing that I'm ashamed of being said or I think or worried other people are going to hear. I hype this thing anyway as much as I can. So, you know, what I said, I said. Sometimes I'll listen to a retrospect like, I could have worded that better. But oh, well. Oh, well.
Too late now. The past is fixed.
Too bad. My foot's already in my mouth and I'm tasting diabetic sock. Okay, you know, there you go. There you go.
Should we do our outro?
I think we should do our outro. Let's make that happen. All right. This has been a Shallow and Pedantic, episode 16, ostensibly about King Arthur. I am Andrew.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Kieran.
Thank you all for coming by.